What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports here at the Voice of College Football. If you're a Big Ten fan, please subscribe to our Big Ten channel. If you're a Penn State fan, please subscribe to our Penn State channel. We're going to preview the 2022 schedule here, but before we get to 2022, let's look back at the schedule from 2021. This is the schedule for 2021 for Penn State, and you can see in the non-conference, of course, they played Auburn, won that game at home. They had it rolling early on, 5-0, but then ran into a tough game against Iowa, and then you had Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan State, 5 tough losses. That Illinois loss was a brutal one. I mean, that was one that Penn State really should have won. But you look at the schedule here out of the West. Yes, they had to play Iowa, the top team out of the West. That was a tough draw there. Illinois wound up tripping them up, even though they were not one of the top teams out of the West. And they played Wisconsin, so a really tough schedule having both Wisconsin and Iowa on the road out of the West, and then also playing Auburn in the non-conference. So yes, this was a very, very tough schedule, and it wound up putting Penn State there at 7-5. Let's look ahead at 2022. This is the schedule. Before we go game by game, let's take a look at who Penn State plays outside of the division, because we know, of course, that Penn State will play every Big Ten East team. So in the non-conference, they'll play Ohio and Central Michigan. Should be pretty easy wins there. But then they'll play Auburn on the road in what should be a huge non-conference matchup. The game was really good last year at Penn State. This time it's at Auburn. Both teams come into this year with potential to be pretty good, and also a lot of question marks. So that's going to be a really intriguing matchup there in another big non-conference one. We have several big non-conference games this year, but who do they play out of the West? Well, they get a pretty good draw this year. They get Purdue on the road, but then they get Northwestern and Minnesota. So you don't have to play Wisconsin, don't have to play Iowa, don't have to play Nebraska, who could be a sneaky good team out of the West this year after losing all those close games last season. Purdue on the road will be tough. Minnesota will be a good team. So it's not necessarily, not saying it's an easy draw out of the West, but it's probably about who you'd want to have to face here. You want to play Northwestern, and you don't want to play Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska, in my opinion. Purdue and Minnesota, both teams that are capable of being pretty good, but both teams that, Penn State should probably be the better team. It's hard to say it, it's so early right now, but those are, I think, a favorable draw out of the West with Purdue, Northwestern, and Minnesota. So let's get to the schedule here. They open up with Purdue on September the 3rd on the road. So that is a tough game there, playing in the first game of the year on the road. We'll see if Penn State can win that one. That will really set the tone for the season. You've got to find a way to get a win there. A Purdue team that should be pretty good this year, but a game that Penn State can absolutely win. And then you have Ohio after that, and then it's on the road at Auburn on September 17th. Huge game like I talked about in the non-conference, and then Central Michigan on September the 24th. So you've got 2 easy wins there in September, but then 2 tough road games, Purdue and Auburn. They're tough, but they're winnable. Penn State has a chance to start 4-0, but they also have a chance to start 2-2. So that'll be really key. I know they got off to a great start last year, and it wound up, it didn't go that great. But if they can start off 4-0 with this schedule and what they have the rest of the way, I think they're going to finish much stronger this season. Going into the month of October, they start off with Northwestern, a game that they should be able to win. And then you have a tough stretch here with Michigan on the road, then Minnesota, and then Ohio State. Michigan on the road after a bye week. That'll be a huge game in the Big Ten East. I think that could be a separator. It could be a game that, where the loser maybe gets knocked out of the race. We don't know how good everyone's going to be, but if Michigan does drop off some this year and Penn State wins that game, Michigan, they might kind of get knocked off, and Penn State will be the team that's still fighting for a chance to win the East. I think Ohio State's going to be the favorite, but Penn State, the schedule sets up pretty well for them. It gives them a chance. Minnesota after that at home, and then Ohio State on October 29th. They get them at home. They played them tough last year on the road. We'll see what they can do at home this year. And then it's Indiana after that on November the 5th. On the road, Indiana, a team that disappointed this past season, but should be improved, I would think. and then Maryland, and then at Rutgers. So a pretty easy month of November, at least the first part of that, with Indiana, Maryland, and Rutgers. And then they close out with Michigan State. They get them at home as well, so that's a game that Penn State's probably going to be favored in. So it comes down to the start of the season with Purdue and Auburn on the road. If they can win those two games, Penn State's going to be in the conversation in the Big Ten East. If they lose one or two of those games, which the Auburn game is really not going to affect the standings, but still, just from a confidence standpoint, you really need to, if you're going to have a chance to go all the way and win this division, you're probably going to need to win both of those games. Just to build that confidence and believe that they could beat Michigan. But even if they lose to Michigan, they do get Ohio State and Michigan State at home. So if they win those two games, there's still a path for them. But I think that Purdue game is just going to be key when we're talking about the standings in the Big Ten and having a chance. That Purdue game, I don't know that Penn State can beat Michigan on the road and also beat Ohio State and also beat Michigan State. It's going to be tough. It's just going to be tough to win all of those games. So if you lose to Purdue, it's going to be tough to get there with one loss. But if you can beat Purdue and finish with just one loss in the Big Ten East, I think it gives you a great shot to win that division. So looking at this schedule again, it sets up pretty well. Their draw out of the West is not bad. They get two of their three big games in the East at home. And because of that, I think Penn State has to be considered a team that at least has a shot in the Big Ten East in 2022.